I've always known my brother Daniel to have a quirky sense of humor, but what happened in Tuscany was beyond any prank I could have imagined. It was supposed to be a getaway, a chance for me to reset him after a divorce that left me feeling like a shell of myself. The plan was simple: a trip to Italy with Daniel and his group of friends, a mix of old college buddies and new acquaintances from his tech startup. They promised it would be healing, therapeutic even. But as I stood on the cobblestone street of a quaint village in Tuscany, watching the taillights of their rented van disappear into the night, I realized I had been duped. The village was silent except for the distant hum of cicadas and the occasional clink of glasses from a nearby trattoria. I was alone with no phone, no wallet, and no goodbye. At first, I thought it was just a bad joke, a cruel jest to see how I'd react. But as the minutes turned into an hour, the reality set in. They had left me here, in a place where I barely spoke the language. I wandered through the narrow alleyways, my heart pounding with each step, unsure if I was walking towards help or merely trying to look less abandoned. The village was picturesque with its terracotta roofs and flower-adorned balconies, but all I could see was the emptiness, the void left by their departure. A small bakery caught my eye, its windows foggy with warmth, and the scent of freshly baked bread wafted out, hitting me like a wave of nostalgia. Inside, an elderly woman, whom I'd later learn was named Maria, paused her work to look at me. Her eyes softened, and though we couldn't communicate with words, her kindness transcended language barriers. She gestured towards a chair by the wall outlet, offering me a place to sit and a chance to charge my phone. I sat down, my hands shaking as I plugged in my phone, but it was dead, and I had no charger, no adapter. Maria, noticing my distress, crossed the room and placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. It was a wordless gesture, yet it spoke volumes. I stared at the useless charger, feeling the weight of my situation settle in. This wasn't just a prank, it was a deliberate act. They had left me here, not just in this village, but in a life where I was no longer part of their plans, their curated reality. I had come here to heal, to find peace after a marriage that had unraveled, leaving me feeling discarded. Now I was truly discarded, left on the side of a foreign road like luggage that didn't fit their aesthetic. As the night deepened, I must have fallen asleep sitting up, my neck aching and the hard chair leaving lines across my thighs. Morning came, and with it, the soft golden light spilled onto the cobblestones, the scent of rising bread warming the air like a comforting blanket. Maria appeared from the back room, holding a tangle of cords and plugs. Her fingers sifted through them until she pulled out a slightly yellowed adapter, offering it to me with a hopeful look. "Try this," she said in heavily accented English. I thanked her, plugged it in, and waited. The screen blinked, then buzzed to life, showing a mere 1% battery. Not enough for anything substantial, but enough to flicker with hope. Before I could open an app, the screen lit up with an incoming call. The name on the screen made my chest tighten. Daniel. My thumb hovered over the decline button, but something made me answer. "Hello?" My voice was steady, but my heart was not. "Alex," Daniel said, his voice smooth as if nothing had happened. "Finally." I didn't speak. He filled the silence. "Your friends are worried, man. I mean, really worried. You just disappeared. You always do this when it gets hard." "I didn't vanish, Daniel," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I was left." He sighed like I was a child who still didn't understand the lesson. "Look, maybe the timing was off, but everyone's under stress. You have to stop taking everything so personally." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, my heart thudding. I knew this dance. Daniel never yelled, never played the villain, just endlessly reasonable, always angling the mirror to show my own reflection and ask what was wrong with me. "I talked to your ex-wife again," he said casually. "She's devastated. Your friends don't even know where you are. Do you realize how selfish this looks?" I didn't ask for any of this, I thought, but didn't say. Instead, I stayed silent, letting every word he said press on old bruises. Then came the line that snapped everything into focus. "I know Tuscany isn't ideal, but maybe you'll come back a little clearer, a little cleaner." Cleaner. I froze. I hadn't told anyone where I was, not even the village name. I hadn't tagged a location, hadn't posted anything. But Daniel knew. He didn't say it like a guess. He said it like he'd seen it. That call wasn't concern, it was surveillance in disguise. Goodbye, Daniel, I said and hung up. I sat there for a long time, breathing shallow, letting the shock wash through me. Then I stood and walked to the bakery's doorway. Outside, the sun lit up a distant row of cypress trees that stretched like arms into the hills. Quiet, steady, rooted. I'm not your mess to clean up, I whispered. Not anymore. I spent the night tossing and turning on the hard chair, the scent of yeast and sugar from the bakery offering little comfort against the turmoil inside me. By morning, the need to move, to do something, was overwhelming. Sitting still made me feel hunted, like prey waiting for the next blow. I ventured into the village market, a vibrant square filled with stalls under bright umbrellas, wooden crates stacked with tomatoes, peaches, and bottles of olive oil. I didn't have a plan, only the urge to look normal, to blend in. I picked up a small basket and wandered, grabbing a loaf of crusty bread, a handful of apricots, and a bottle of water. As I reached for a bunch of thyme, someone bumped into me, hard enough to jostle my bag. "Oh, I'm so sorry," a woman said, her voice too cheerful. She had shoulder-length hair the color of honey and sunglasses perched on her head, though the day was cloudy. She smiled like we were old friends. "Alex, right?" I froze. My name hadn't passed a stranger's lips since I landed in Italy. I searched her face for recognition, but there was none. Only that smooth, curated smile. "Didn't we meet at that vineyard tour in Chianti?" she offered, tilting her head. "Or maybe you're friends with Daniel?" My stomach clenched. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Every instinct screamed that something was off. Before I could ask her anything, where she was from, who she knew, she smiled wider and disappeared into the crowd with a breezy, "Take care." I stood there for a full minute, clutching my basket like a shield. Then I walked away, slowly at first, then faster. How did she know my name? The question rang louder than any bell tower. Back at the bakery, I ducked into the rear room where Maria stored flour and cleaned vegetables. She looked up from peeling carrots and gave me that same steady glance I was beginning to rely on. I offered a nod, silent reassurance that I was okay. Sort of. Once I connected to the bakery's patchy Wi-Fi, my phone pinged with delayed notifications. I opened my email, my heart sinking as I saw a message from my mother. Subject line, "From homebody sweetheart Daniel told us you're not well. If you need help, please don't shut us out again. We're all worried. This behavior isn't like you." My hands tightened around the phone. So that was the angle. Now I wasn't just lost. I was unstable. The same storyline they had fed our family years ago when I cried through my first miscarriage. When I stopped smiling after the divorce, Daniel had always known how to play the part. The capable one, the fixer. He'd walk into a room with his confident stride and say things like, "He just needs space," or "It's a lot for him right now." But what he really meant was, "Don't believe him, believe me." I remembered a Christmas years ago, sitting at the dinner table trying to explain to my parents that my ex-wife had cut me out of our joint accounts. Daniel had laughed, "That's not abuse, Alex. It's marriage. Grow up." And they'd nodded because Daniel always sounded more reasonable. My eyes burned as I walked behind the bakery, past a row of potted herbs, into the clearing beyond. I sank to the ground, the realization hitting me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just about being stranded, it was about being rewritten, recast as the emotional one, the problem, the version of me that Daniel could manage, contain, dismiss. I tilted my head toward the sky, blinking hard. They had the script. They just needed me to vanish so they could narrate it. I stayed there for a while, letting the quiet press into me, letting the rage cool and crystallize. Then I wiped my face with my sleeve, stood up, and walked back through the alleyway. I wasn't spiraling. I wasn't broken. And if they wanted a version of me they could explain away, they were about to meet the one they couldn't. The next few days were a blur of action, my mind racing as I pieced together what had been done to me. I needed evidence, something concrete to prove that this wasn't just a prank, but a calculated plan to erase me. Maria, sensing my urgency, introduced me to her nephew Luca. He was a young lawyer with an office in the next town over, and he agreed to help me, intrigued by the story and eager to prove his worth. Luca's office was a small room lined with books and the scent of old paper. I sat across from him, detailing the events, the call from Daniel, the woman at the market, the emails from my family. He listened intently, his pen scratching notes on a legal pad. "We need to start with your digital footprint," Luca said, his English precise. "And we need to document everything you can remember." I nodded, my throat tight. I began to recount the journey, the emails, the social media posts, the interactions, everything I could recall. Luca asked questions, probing for details, for inconsistencies, for anything that might help. "First, we'll contact your bank, your email provider, your social media accounts," he said, his voice calm, reassuring. "We'll establish a timeline, gather evidence of the deceit. Then we'll consider legal actions." He handed me a stack of papers. "These are formal requests for access to your accounts, your financial records. We'll need to prove that your identity was used without consent." I signed the papers, my hands shaking. This wasn't just reclaiming my life, it was reclaiming my narrative. Over the next week, Luca worked tirelessly, making calls, sending emails, and gathering information. I sat in the bakery, my makeshift office, using Maria's laptop to access my accounts. Each login was a battle, each password changed a small victory. I found emails in my name, sent from my account, apologizing for my absence, assuring friends and family that I was fine, just needed space. I found posts on social media, crafted to paint a picture of an unstable, unreliable Alex. It was like watching a slow-motion replay of my life being rewritten. Luca came to the bakery one evening, his face grave but determined. "We've found enough to proceed with legal action," he said. "We have evidence of unauthorized access to your accounts, misrepresentation, and potentially identity theft." I exhaled, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "What now?" "Now," Luca said, "we file a complaint with the authorities, and we reach out to your contacts, your family, to set the record straight. We'll also need to contact your ex-wife. Make sure she understands the full scope of what's happened." I swallowed hard. This wasn't just about Daniel anymore. It was about reclaiming my life from everyone who had been fed the lies. The next day, Luca and I sat at a small trattoria, a table full of papers and a laptop between us. He drafted letters, emails, and legal documents, each one a step towards reclaiming my identity. I wrote a personal statement detailing the deception, the betrayal, the pain. The process was slow, methodical, but each action felt like a strike against the narrative they had spun. I sent messages to friends, to my family, explaining what had happened, asking for their support. Then came the hardest part. I dialed my ex-wife's number, my heart pounding. She answered, her voice cautious. "Alex?" I took a deep breath. "I need to talk to you. It's important." She listened as I explained, her silence speaking volumes. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. I didn't know," she said finally. "I believed him. I'm so sorry, Alex." Her words were like a balm, but they couldn't erase the past. "I just need you to understand," I said. "I need you to know the truth." She promised to help, to share what she knew, to correct the narrative. As I hung up, I felt a sense of empowerment growing within me. They had tried to erase me, to rewrite my story, but I was fighting back. I wasn't just reclaiming my life. I was reclaiming my voice, my truth. And with each step, I was becoming the Alex I always knew I could be, the one they couldn't control, couldn't dismiss. The legal battle was grueling, but with each passing day, I felt the weight of the deception lifting. Luca was relentless, his passion for justice fueling our fight. We gathered more evidence, connected with private investigators, and filed official complaints. The authorities in Italy took the case seriously, understanding the international implications of identity theft and fraud. In the quiet moments, I found solace in the village. Maria's bakery became my sanctuary, her warmth and kindness a balm against the storm. I helped her bake bread, kneading the dough with a sense of purpose, feeling the rhythm of life pulse beneath my palms. The villagers, once strangers, now offered me nods of recognition, their smiles genuine, their curiosity replaced by empathy. One morning as I walked through the market, I noticed a group of tourists snapping photos of the picturesque scene. I paused, watching them, then realized I had become part of the landscape, part of this place. I wasn't just passing through, I was here, living, breathing, fighting. The call came from Luca's office. "We've got a breakthrough," he said, his voice crackling with excitement. "The authorities have traced the unauthorized access to your accounts back to Daniel's IP address. We have enough to press charges." I exhaled, the tension in my chest easing. It was a victory, but not the end. There were still battles to be fought, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had the upper hand. With Luca's help, I began to rebuild. I contacted a friend, a tech-savvy journalist, who helped me secure my digital life. We changed passwords, set up two-factor authentication, and monitored my accounts for any suspicious activity. I reclaimed my online presence, posting updates about my situation, sharing the truth. Slowly, the narrative shifted. Friends reached out, offering support, apologizing for believing the lies. My ex-wife shared her side of the story, her voice adding weight to the truth. The tide was turning, and I was no longer the invisible man, the one left behind. One afternoon, as I sat in the bakery, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from a publisher, one I had reached out 2 weeks ago. They had read my story, the one I had written in the quiet hours, pouring my heart onto the page. Subject line, "Your manuscript." "Dear Alex, we've reviewed your manuscript and we're deeply moved by your story. The raw honesty, the journey of self-discovery, it's compelling. We'd like to offer you a publishing deal. Please contact us at your earliest convenience. Best regards, Sarah Williams, Acquisitions Editor." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. This was more than just a publishing deal. It was a lifeline, a chance to share my truth, to redefine myself. I replied, my fingers trembling, and set up a meeting. The days that followed were a whirlwind. I traveled to Rome, met with the publisher, signed the contract. The book, titled The Erased, would tell my story not as a victim, but as a survivor, as someone who had fought back against erasure. Back in the village, I stood in the market square, the sun setting over the hills, casting long shadows. I felt a sense of peace, of rebirth. I had been discarded, left behind, but now I was reclaiming my life, my story. As I walked back to the bakery, I saw Maria waiting for me, a smile on her face. She handed me a loaf of bread, still warm from the oven, and I hugged her, gratitude overwhelming me. "You're not alone," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You never were." I nodded, knowing she was right. I had found a new family here, a new purpose. The village that had once been my prison was now my sanctuary, my home. And as the stars began to twinkle in the twilight sky, I knew that this was just the beginning. I was no longer the man left behind. I was the man who had found his way back, stronger, wiser, and ready to tell his story. The rebirth was complete, and the future was mine to write. The book release had come and gone, a whirlwind of interviews, book signings, and media attention. The Erased had struck a chord, resonating with readers around the world who had felt invisible, erased, or silenced. The story of my fight back against erasure had become a beacon of hope for many. Now, months later, I stood at the edge of the village, looking out over the rolling hills of Tuscany. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. I had grown to love this place, its simplicity, its warmth, and its people. But there was one more chapter to write, one more journey to take. I had made peace with my past, but there were still loose ends to tie up. I needed to return home, to confront those who had tried to erase me, to reclaim my place in the world I had left behind. The flight back to the States was a mix of emotions, excitement, anxiety, and a sense of closure. As the plane touched down, I felt a pang of nostalgia, the familiarity of my homeland wrapping around me like an old coat. I took a taxi to my old neighborhood, the streets unchanged yet different through the lens of time. I walked up to my childhood home, the house where I had grown up, where memories, both good and bad, had been made. My parents opened the door, their faces a mix of surprise and relief. They had read the book, heard my story, and now they understood the pain I had endured. We hugged, the embrace long and heartfelt, a reconciliation that words couldn't fully express. Over dinner, we talked, really talked, for the first time in years. They listened as I explained the deceit, the manipulation, the betrayal. They offered apologies, their voices thick with regret. I accepted them, knowing that forgiveness was part of my rebirth. The next day, I visited my ex-wife. She lived in a new apartment, a fresh start for her, too. We sat in her living room, the air heavy with unspoken emotions. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I should have seen through it." I shook my head. "You were manipulated, too. We both were." We talked about our past, the love we had shared, the pain we had caused each other. It wasn't about rekindling a flame, but about understanding, about healing. We agreed to be friends, to support each other's journeys. Then came the hardest part, confronting Daniel. I found him at his office, the same one where he had once played the role of the fixer, the reasonable one. He looked up as I entered, his face a mask of shock. "Alex," he said, his voice unsteady. "I didn't expect—" "I know," I interrupted. "I'm here to tell you that I've reclaimed my life." He sat down, his hands clenched on the desk. I I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted— You wanted control," I said, my voice firm. "You wanted to rewrite my story, to make me disappear. But I'm not gone. I'm here, and I'm stronger because of what you did." He looked down, shame etched into his features. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I nodded, accepting his apology not for him, but for myself. "I forgive you, Daniel, but this is the last time we'll speak. I'm moving forward, and you need to let me go." I left his office, the weight of the past lifting with each step. I walked through the city, the place that had once been my world, now just a chapter in my life. The return wasn't just about confronting the past, it was about embracing the future. I visited old friends, reconnected with those who had believed in me, and shared my story with those who hadn't. I saw the impact of my words, the way they had touched lives, inspired change. Before leaving, I stood in front of the house where my ex-wife and I had lived, where our dreams had been shattered. I took a deep breath, the memories flooding back, but this time, they didn't hurt. They were just part of the journey. I returned to Italy, to the village that had become my home, to Maria's bakery, to the life I had built. As I walked through the market, the villagers greeted me with smiles, their faces familiar, their warmth a constant. And as I sat in the bakery, the scent of fresh bread filling the air, I knew that this was where I belonged. I had returned not just to my past, but to myself. I was no longer the man left behind. I was the man who had found his way back, not just to a place, but to a purpose. The return had been about closure, but it was also about beginnings. I had reclaimed my life, my story, and now I was ready to write the next chapter, wherever it might lead. The village had settled into its quiet rhythm, the seasons changing, life flowing like the gentle streams that cut through the hills. I had become part of the fabric of this place, my story now woven into the tapestry of the community. One crisp autumn morning as I walked through the market, I noticed a new stall, its vibrant colors and exotic spices drawing curious glances. The woman behind it was unfamiliar, her face warm and inviting. She caught my eye, and with a smile, she beckoned me over. "Morning," she said in accented English. "I'm Amara. Just opened in this stall. You're Alex, right? The one who wrote The Erased?" I nodded, surprised. "Yes, that's me." "I read your book," she continued, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "It's inspired me to share my own story, to start anew." We talked, and I learned that Amara had fled her home country, seeking refuge in a fresh start.